I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And if we want to talk about robots that are literally outside of this world, I think that we have to talk about Starchild. And it's such a wonderfully unique, beautiful robot, and I'm so excited about a lot of things, especially for what could be to come. So I have Brandon, Tony, Sarah, and Rory from Team Omega Starchild. Welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Thanks for having us, as always.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Brandon, you've been on, Tony, you've been on, but I'm glad to have a bunch of the team together to talk about this. So, one thing that I love and appreciate about Omega Team is just the level of creativity and like how much you commit to the theme. And it's funny, I was just reviewing the BattleBots website and noticed the little clip about Starchild being a real creature that does exist and lives in your walls if you don't buy enough merchandise. So I love that. So if nobody has noticed that, I thought that was really fun. So will Starchild come out and stand at the foot of your bed if you don't buy enough merch from robotsruinmylife.com?
Yeah, robotsruinmylife.com. I think that was a Rory. I think that was a Rory idea. I think that was him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't an idea. I'm just reporting. I can't. I'm not making this up. I'm serious.
This is true.
Saying you didn't buy enough of the team merch, Rory.
Well, I know people who may not have bought enough merch.
They found out firsthand, so
Yeah.
we appreciate all the
if it had come and stood at the foot of my bed, I wouldn't be here reporting it. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. Yeah.
No, that's why I have Rory's little mini Starchild.
That's why I'm wearing this shirt, because this is protection.
Yeah. It's close. It got the Omega protection at least.
Exactly. But yeah, I love it. I think that's so fun. That's really more than anything is if I like a team and I gravitate to a team, it's because they just commit to like this idea. And I think you really have done that with Starchild. Now, I mean, I know some fans have kind of heard about the history of how Starchild came to be. But I'd really love to just kind of talk about that on the show, because it's such a wonderful, like this relationship between NHRL and BattleBots, and seeing the ideas that come from one place to the other, I think is amazing. And so I just want to, talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can get into all the specifics as you'd like, but I mean, from a 35,000 foot perspective right now, I'll just chat quickly about the history of it. We started in fall of 2020, I think. Yeah, it was the first edition of Starchild. And so that was a 3-pounder. And so it did okay at its first event. I think it went 2-2. Actually still continues to be the only time I've ever lost a drive motor in that robot was in my very first fight against a big vertical spinner. And that's in any of the editions of the robot. So it's kind of one of those funny things is that you get like a failure early on, and then you run it in 40 fights and then it never happens again. In the beginning, you're like, oh shoot, this might be a flaw with the robot, and then you run it a million times and it might not be. But we ran it all through 2021, had a lot of success with it in 2021, built a 30-pound version of it late in 2021. Went to Motorama in spring of 2022 with that 30 and the 3. Did really well with both the 3 and the 30. I think the 3 was 3rd and the 30 was 4th or 5th, something like that. So it did pretty well with those. And then after the 2021 BattleBot season, we decided to switch it up and build Starchild at 250. And we can get into any of those specifics as you see fit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with a design like that, because it's so just obviously it's big and it's, you know, I would think more complicated to take from a smaller version to a bigger version than maybe say some of the standard, you know, verts and things like that that you would see. Was that the case? And like, what were the biggest challenges with making it just larger?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's stuff from the physics perspective that's way more difficult. I mean, you look at scaling a small robot up to a big robot that may be like a 2 or 4 wheel drive vert, something you're dealing with wedge game, you're dealing with how to get the most traction, how to stick yourself to the floor the best. You're dealing with these kind of engineering challenges. Starchild is extremely different. The challenges that we face and have to overcome are wildly different than most other robots. So, and this is something that I think a lot of fans don't quite realize when they look at the robot and see it fight on the show, is that there's a ton that goes into stuff that's literally invisible. The center of gravity on the robot is probably the most important physical characteristic to it swinging the way it's supposed to swing. And that aspect of the robot is something you can't see, right? So to somebody watching the TV show, it's just like, oh, well, just make the arm longer. It's like, oh, well, just make the weapon heavier. It's like, ah, yes. But if you do that, every 1 pound you add at the end of the weapon, you need to add 4 pounds at the back of the chassis in order to balance it out. So now you've added and you've added 5 total pounds to the robot. Now, where does that weight come from? You know, so there's a lot of design challenges like that as far as the actual construction of the robot. So that's big. The moment of inertia of a larger robot is significantly higher than that of the 3-pounder. So that's another thing that we had to overcome. And then on top of the physics challenges with building this larger robot, there's also materials challenges. So I mean, probably the biggest single materials challenge we faced this year with respect to physical construction of the robot was the wheels. At the 3-pound level, we can cut 1/4-inch UHMW into wheels and it's done. But you can't do that at the heavyweight. It's a lot more challenging than that. So Sarah, would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. This was one of the design challenges I took on a little bit of, and Amanda, one of our other teammates who couldn't make it today, took on a lot of the research and the like sourcing of this material. Because like Brandon said, like small one, just get it to the UHMW, cut into wheels, you're good. And the reason like it wouldn't work at the heavyweight just due to weight. So we ended up going with a composite material. It's called Tegris. It's a polypropylene weave that they make into these massive like 8 by 6 foot sheets, something like that. And they're just pressed under like a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. So you end up with these sheets of like sort of stronger material than it would be if it was just like a weave, but it's not as heavy as like a solid block of plastic. So the trade-off that we were looking for there was like the weight versus durability. But it's getting that material is a pain in the ass. There's only a few manufacturers in the country that make it. It's very expensive. We ended up going in with Ricky from Mammoth and Jonathan Schultz from Huge to try to get an order of this done, just so we could all like get this material, which they use in their robots as well. So sourcing was a hassle, and then after that, you got to cut this this very, very nasty composite. It's not toxic, but it's a pain to cut. So that was certainly a challenge for this season, and it's and after that we had to rivet them. So there was like 200 rivets per wheel, something like that. So just like hours of processing, hours of work, getting the material, hours of cutting this material, all to just get like a set of 6, and then no one even thinks about that when they watch the show.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that this material that we got, we thought was vaguely the same sheet to sheet, but it's really not. And the sheet that we got, we were supposed to get, I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but we were supposed to get X by Y. And what we ended up with was like X minus 6 and Y minus 6, because the press that they use doesn't actually go to the corners of the material. So you end up with these edges that are not fully compressed together. And so you lose all that material. And for a material that's this expensive, it's pretty disappointing to see that kind of fallout. And then on top of that, we had different sheets. If you look at our top and bottom armor is also made out of Tegris. That was made out of these offcuts that we got from race car spoilers. And that material quality was significantly better than that we got from the big sheets for our wheels. So, and these are things that we had no idea before this season. These are things we all was learned this year as we built this robot, and Spocky and Amanda did a great job of sourcing through or getting through all these challenges in order to make and wheel, right? And then the Euro looks at the robot and goes, yep, it's got wheels. It's like, that was so much work.
Yeah, I hadn't even remembered because of the fact that the dimensions were wrong. We'd essentially designed our wheels to be as big as we could fit on the nominal dimensions of the sheet, just to get the size we wanted. But when it showed up, it was not the nominal dimensions, it was smaller. So we had to sort of do some rush sort of redesigning. We ended up having to split some parts of the wheel into segments and then attach them together. And this was just one of those challenges you don't foresee. And then so something that was supposed to be real quick, like we'll get our material, we'll cut our wheels, we'll be done, turn into, oh God, we have our material, but we can't cut the wheels we wanted. What can we do? And a week of brainstorming and recading and getting to the point where we could actually cut them. It was just eats a week off your timeline that you didn't expect.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that obviously we're under the gun, right? So even if you do have these things come up, you don't have time to source new material. You just have to kind of figure out how to deal with what you have. So I think that, Sarah and Amanda did an amazing job, with the wheels this year. But it's an experimental robot. You got to just put it out there and hope that, it all goes according to plan. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as a side note too, Tony, I want to talk to you a little bit about, about the. It's a weird question to have, but I mean, the merch for Team Omega is just amazing, and I know that you are a big part of that, and I mean, I would definitely say Omega Team's merch is top 3. Bunny is really difficult to rival.
So sheer volume of things she offers. So you can get the yo-yo, you can get sandals, you can get everything in one-stop shopping. So that's but yeah, I mean, the merch, it's it's something that I do as my day job anyways. I have everything in-house to do it all here. So this little printer over my shoulder over here, everything that I do is on that printer right there. So everything that you get from Robots during my life, everything pretty much for the team, minus some exotic stuff like Hawaiian shirts and hats and things, are all done right in-house right here. So, I mean, I was very fortunate and blessed to be with a great team that had the faith that just went, listen, make something cool. And we bounce some things off here and there, but for the most part, they just go make something neat. And I think that everybody seemed to like it. All the fans kind of connected with it. And I think that with the themes that we were given, obviously this is Starchild centered, but Ripperoni as well. I think with the themes that we decided to go with kind of the aliens, Ridley Scott aliens movies and a pizza theme, I think it gave great source material. I think they're both really great, iconic pop culture kind of things that we could feed off of. And I think it just everything connected. I think the robots look great. From an engineering standpoint, they performed fantastic. I think they look good. I think just the team embraced everything too. They all wanted to kind of play the role and kind of look like a pizza chef or look like an astronaut or whatever, So I think it's more the team making it look good than the actual merch. But I'm really fortunate that they have the faith that I can make it look okay. So that's been great. So
yeah, absolutely. It was one of the first things I noticed at the beginning of the season. Now kind of getting into things with the season, I swear, and I'm just really curious to get your all thoughts on this, that a new crazy looking robot comes onto the scene and BattleBots is let's make it fight every other crazy looking robot that we can think of. That's just the way that the schedule worked out. I mean, is that something that you liked, or were you just let us fight whatever? Is that what you want, or do you want to just be able to fight other normal bots?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've pondered a lot since the event. I mean, we've had now almost 8 months or almost 10 months now to think about this. So trust me, it's run through my head quite a few times. My take on it is that at Norwalk, when Starchild was doing really, really good, the thing about Norwalk is that it's vaguely random teams that you fight. And it's primarily for the builders, and their creed is that it's builders first. And so you're not getting to a degree like curated matchups, right? And so, and BattleBots is such, or combat robotics in general is such a rock paper scissors kind of game that if you're in a random setup and you get the right string of opponents, you can absolutely tear through them. And there was, I think for a while, I think, and I mean, Norwalk has exploded not only in popularity, but in preparedness now. Everyone's more prepared for everything. You're not going to catch somebody being wildly unprepared for like a vertical spinner, right? Like most robots are going to have like a fork configuration or a plow configuration, you know. All these things are becoming way more common now. And one of the things that's a lot more common now is like top attack configurations and such. So that kind of thing is definitely becoming more common, but I'd say then it was a little bit less common. And so we were able to, especially with people who didn't know how to fight Starchild, just do a ton of damage, and it was great. But when you get to BattleBots, they don't want to see that. They don't want to see one robot that physically can't hit the other robot in their setup fight night cards. And that's kind of the fight that Starchild preys on, you know? And that is, like I said, they're not just not going to give that to you. So this was probably a failure on our part as far as design of the robot, but I wouldn't really do anything differently because we had so little time, and what we got out there was like working. It's not like we could have built all these other configurations to fight other robots because we built what we had the time to build.
And you really don't have a whole lot of weight left over to adapt that much, right?
Yeah.
You can't.
So it's like, we could have made different wheels and different weapon standoffs and different weapon weights and such, but there's not all that much you can do on that front when you don't have a lot of time. Especially with it's a first year robot. I'd much rather spend the time testing and drive practicing the robot rather than trying to manufacture additional configurations for a first time robot. So from that aspect, I think it would have been great if we had been more prepared to fight more wacky kinds of robots. But in retrospect, I see why they did it. I mean, they got some cool fights. We obviously didn't have success in the win column this year, but if I could take any silver lining out of it, is between the two Omega robots, we fought 8 fight night fights, and 5 of them were BattleBots Fight of the Week fights. So 3 of Rip's fights and 2 of Starchild's fights were fights of the week. So pretty good. Says to me that the producers and the viewers liked what was going on, even if we were getting smashed. And so moving forward, definitely keeping it on our list of high priorities is fight robots that aren't necessarily the best robots for you to fight, and looking into that for future years of how can we get better at that, because obviously we were not good enough at it this year.
I mean, the one thing that I will say, I would take away as an accomplishment is looking down the list, all of the losses were judges' decisions. I would imagine, though, given the design, that wasn't much of a surprise. It seems like it would be pretty difficult to knock Starchild out.
Yeah, in general, it's a very hard robot to knock out. I mean, like you said, the heavyweight was never knocked out. The 3-pounder in between 2020 and now has been knocked out once, and that was by Project Liftoff, who put on like these super long teeth to cut through the wheels. And I made it so close. I was trying to argue to not get counted out so that I could bring it to a JD as my wheel was like dabbed off of the robot. So that was close. I almost made it. But I mean, the 30 has been knocked out by Beam. Like, I mean, these are the kind of robots that we're talking about here. And even then, it's like that was mostly because the 30 is built, since it's built with my own money, I try to build it as cheaply as possible. So there's things that like could be solved with money. It's like, yes, let's machine flanges into our drive shafts, or we could not do that and have it cost a quarter as much. And it's like, all right, let's see if we can make it work. It didn't work. So Yeah, no, it's a really hard robot to knock out. I think the producers appreciate that. I think it's a good. I mean, I think it's a good thing. Certainly better to make a 3-minute exciting long fight, 3-minute long exciting fight than a 15-second fight. So
Yeah.
if you had to choose a way to lose, I guess I would choose that way.
Exactly. You know, and another thing that I feel like I need to bring up, because I always like to dispel a lot of myths to fans, or like opinions that fans hold that just maybe they're not looking at the right way. It is that one of those things is the fans that say like Starchild is like huge. And you know, the way that I've always looked at it is, yes, like obviously there's the comparison because of the large wheels. I get that. But to me, that would be like comparing any two 4-wheel verts that use the same wheels and say, hey, these two robots are the same. They're really not. And I'd love for you to like talk about the differences between the two so that fans can understand like they're not the same robot.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is how they fight, right? Starchild intends to hit people on the top. It tends to be a thwackbot, swing over people and hit them on the top. Huge's design, while they can spin down with their blade, they prefer not to from a durability perspective. It puts turbo load on their motors and all of their shafting and everything, so they prefer not to do it. They can, but they prefer not to. And so we have to drive in a way that we drive over people, we swing around. I mean, it's the kind of thing that would be so cool if it had like a flamethrower or something, right? It's like spraying fire all over the place, but not in the cards. But that's the kind of thing we're hoping for, is this much more dramatic appearance of the robot like flailing all over the place and swatting at the opponent and hitting them and generating this huge cloud of sparks. So that's the kind of thing that is the easiest thing to see when you watch a fight, because I think a lot of people look at the pictures and say just 2-wheel spinner, that's just the same thing. But I mean, 35% of the field was 4-wheel drive vertical spinners. Like, can we have 2 robots that have wheels that are not this big? Like, can we make this happen? So yeah, I mean, and the thing is, you're never going to change a lot of people's minds. They're going to get a first impression and they're going to roll with that. But I think the general opinion with builders and with people who we're friends with is that it's obviously, if you watch it fight, a very different robot, and can occupy a different niche than Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to jump on that a little bit, like, especially as I mean, what Brandon was saying was just like, people maybe look at it from pictures and they think about, I don't know, they just think about Huge as like the first robot in BattleBots that had big wheels, but we're the second. So I think perhaps we'll see more in the future. I don't know if that's actually, building big wheels is fun, but it's also hard. So I don't blame people for not wanting to do it. But it probably is just an exposure thing. Like, people see Huge and they're like, this I know and understand. They see Starchild, they're like, this is new, but it looks like the thing I already know. So
yeah, and plus like
exposure might help.
Did people just forget that thwackbots exist? Like, I know we have like the big flat spoked wheels, but like thwackbots with big wheels that swing a thing over the top, like, they've been a thing for a long time. So I would go, oh well, that's more like I don't know, the Master, or like Gabriel, for example, if you know, from the UK. So yeah, like, it's not, if you're gonna compare it against Huge, you gotta compare it against all these other similar robots as well. So
Yeah, for sure. Something else that I was curious about too, I mean, I can look at things and make my own assumptions, but I mean, when you went into this season knowing that it's a new robot, did you intend to go in with this being a learning season and you expected that you might have some mixed results, or were you hoping for something different?
Definitely hoping for something different. You don't go in expecting to lose. If you go in expecting to lose, you will lose. And I mean, the number one like founding principle of Omega Team is to have fun. So that's the big thing, chief amongst them. And it's definitely hard to have fun when you're getting creamed every fight. Let me tell you that. Before the rebuild, before the Huge fight, the rebuild after the Huge fight, actually after wasn't so bad. But especially the rebuild after Gigabyte and stuff were really, really tough. But the I really hope that we'd have done better, but the tough thing is that it's like a lot of decisions that we made that I think in retrospect were mistakes were not things that we could have like prototyped and figured out. For example, our weapon powertrain was something that we tested on a dyno, and we're like, all right, this is good. This gets us the spin up we want. This gets us all the things that we want. And then we put it into the arena and we go, man, this really just doesn't have the beans that we need it to. And so it's one of those things. I mean, it's you bring the best thing you got, and sometimes it's not good enough. And so for that, it definitely was. And so we're definitely looking into that in the future. You don't want anything to be a like test year, right? But sometimes it ends up that way.
I actually think that, you said, was it kind of a learning season? I would argue that every event or season or any robot in any class, anything you do is a learning experience, right? There's always something that breaks that you don't anticipate. There's always something you can do better that you don't realize until something goes wrong, right? So I think that we learned a lot about a lot of things this season. But I think in all weight classes, everything we do, all of us, we learn from and make our stuff better. Through losses or wins, it doesn't matter. You're always learning. So I would argue that, every season for every team, for every robot is a learning season. Always. That's the only way you get better. So.
Oh yeah, that is definitely the case for sure. I mean, as far as plans to, from those learnings from this past season, is there anything that you can talk about as far as what you're working on with Starchild for, things in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing, so we took a while, we took a break, we looked back at everything. We've had a couple of long team meetings between us, between the whole team, the entirety of Omega team, looking at basically every option that we can think of minor revisions to whole scale renovations to entirely different robots of what we could bring back. And we've kind of narrowed down to a couple of different general ideas. And we've tested some and we prototyped some. And the nice thing now is that hopefully, I mean, well, now at this point it's not, but we're looking like we might film in August, and we're like, that's pretty tight. But now it looks like that's not going to happen, so that's good. It means we have more time in order to iterate these things, and it's like right now we're working on a couple of different projects. So I want to keep stuff under wraps for the most part, mostly because if there's producers watching, I don't want to get them thinking that we're going to do one thing when we're actually going to do another thing. So we got to be careful to a degree, but we definitely, I mean, we really saw what didn't work. I mean, the one thing that I always mention when I'm asked this that I really like is the RIP IPM absolutely slaughtered their weapon motor. Absolutely just slaughtered this year. And it was like, what if we took that? And probably the biggest downside of Starchild was that we used motors that we already knew worked, and we had used in P1, and we used 2 of them on our weapon motor, for our weapon system. That was something that we set early on. It's like, all right, we're doing this, and then moved forward. And in retrospect, like we said before, just wasn't enough beans in order to drive that weapon. So like, what if we took Rip's weapon drive and put it on Starchild? So that's the big thing for me of like, ooh, it would be nice. Because if you look back at some of these fights, we had the ability to put the weapon on our opponents. You look back at Overhaul, we hit his weapon shaft, we bend it, we don't break it. We hit Mammoth's frame, we go through one wall, we don't go through both. We hit Huge right in the center on the side next to the pulley. I missed the pulley, but I was aiming for the pulley, but did almost no damage. It's like, if we can make those shots again, but do damage, all of a sudden that flips a couple fights. The line between winning and losing is so razor thin that that's the kind of thing that can make the difference. What about you guys think? What do you guys think as improvements that you guys want to talk about that you're interested in?
I guess I'll start. So I think that the robot overall was very easy to service, and I think that we figured out some shortcuts and some things that we can probably do to make it a little bit faster for turnaround time between matches. I think we learned a lot from the wheels. I think we know what we like, what we don't like. There's some exotic materials we may have experimented with that didn't really work how we would have liked them to work. So with more, the biggest thing we have on our side now is time. We didn't have time last time. We were scrambling and trying to really get stuff done. This is probably the biggest amount of time we've been allotted to get prepared yet for any season so far for any of us. So I think that's huge. I think utilizing NHRL, some other events in different weight classes, it allows us to test different things and see what works and what doesn't, what scales. So overall, though, I think that the majority of the things in the robot did work. I think that we were just kind of handed a rough set of matches. I think that's you don't want to blame it on that because you should be able to prepare to fight everybody. But I think we're going to learn. We're going to get better. I think that we're going to make the improvements we need to make, and it looks like very promising, the stuff we've looked at already and talked about. So for sure.
Awesome. Did anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, Tony said it well.
I guess if I could just say, because so I wasn't really involved in the design of Starchild. I came to the team like fairly late on. I helped out at BattleBots, but I didn't design anything. I will say from coming in, seeing the completed design, it's pretty solid inside, right? You get to the end of the fight, okay, the wheels look absolutely ragged, and maybe some of the even the weapon assembly can fall out or whatever, but the core of the robot is like almost always pretty undamaged. So I think really not necessarily to add, but to keep that kind of that essence of just durability to the main core of the robot, and then the extra kind of the weapon and the wheels and everything can kind of build from there, as long as you've got that solid platform. And I also want to say, let it never be said that Brandon doesn't learn from his mistakes, because after having said after BattleBots the robot needs more beans, he then went to NHRL with ablative bean armor on his robot. So maybe next BattleBots there may be beans, or there may be live ants, or you never know. You never know what you might see.
That was
They're adding that to
directly
the
spawned from a conversation in the pits. This was this must have been the Gigabyte rebuild. It was late, actually. It might have been later than that, but it was a late on rebuild that we were doing, and we're all delirious in the pits, and we're like, it would be funny. The robot needs more beans. Let's fill it with actual beans. And 5 months
But
later,
wait.
we're fighting at Norwalk with a bean robot.
I mean, I think that Norwalk encourages that sort of thing. So it plays pretty good there. And speaking of that, like you mentioned about possibly going back, testing things there. Are there any current plans to do that? I know, well, Brandon and Tony, I saw both of you there in May, but I was curious, what the rest of the year looks like for that.
Yeah, so in May, we brought Axis of Evil, which is a Starchild adjacent object, which drastically changes the aspect ratio between the wheels and the weapon. It actually takes Spill the Beans' entire weapon assembly, which is a horizontal, and stuffs it onto a Starchild. So it's a ludicrously oversized weapon. Essentially, Starchild's wheels to wheel to weapon ratio is just over 2-to-1. The traditional, like the 3, the 30, and the 250, they all have the same ratio. The Axis of Evil's ratio is like 1.3-to-1. So significantly larger weapon compared to the wheel size. And we learned a lot from that. The damage it did proportionately was ludicrous. The damage was so much better. As every other vert ever has learned, it gyroed really bad. So there's that side of it too. So it's like now we've got to deal with the delivering torque to the ground section. Then there's a bunch of like little stuff with respect to it that was not due to it being Starchild, is due to the construction of the robot itself, like pulleys stripping out and motors overheating and that kind of stuff. So that kind of thing is other stuff to improve for that robot, but maybe not something we can apply to another one. But in the future, I'm not quite sure yet. We're gonna see. I'd like to iterate Axis of Evil a little bit, give it I'll probably do a chassis redesign, but keep all of the mechanics the same. I mean, chassis is all 3D printed, so I just bang out a new one and it's good. But I'd like to do that a little bit. Oh, the other thing that we learned from it was that something else that no other robot has an issue with but us is swing through clearance, right? So the body has to swing through before you get the weapon over. And Axis of Evil swing through weapon clearance is a lot smaller relatively compared to the other Starchild robots because the wheels are smaller. So that we were having issues with bonking into our opponent as we were trying to swing up and over, which gives us which stalls us and either kicks us back or prevents the swing altogether. So that's something that we need to look at improving. Once again, like who else has this issue, right? Is there the Starchild unique
problem.
issues?
Yes.
So not sure. We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to June, but we'll see. Probably sometime later this year, we'll see an iterated Axis of Evil. Probably almost certainly bring the Beetle back at some point, but we'll see. The Beetle needs an overhaul just because all my parts were broken. Like all my wheels were destroyed, all my chassis were cracked. It was like, all right, time for a new one. So everything will move over, but needs an overhaul. So what about you guys?
Weird, isn't it? You know, people say like, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. Whereas for us, it's like, don't let your butt hit the other robot on the way over. It's like,
yeah, I mean, totally.
that is the real challenge we have to face.
Accurate.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to give a shout out to Starchild Omega Team sponsors, because as we know, these bots wouldn't be possible without them. So
yeah, let's start off with Spocky. You can do the
Sure,
title.
Yes, that's right. So our two title sponsors are Leap Labs, embedded electronic engineering services company, to where I work. So I'm a little bit biased, but it's a great company. Just check it out if you ever need any embedded engineering. And our other title sponsor is Pivotal Robotic Company, which is a robot logistics company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They're really cool. Check them out too. Make green robot
great.
arms. So,
They're wonderful to work with. We've done a couple of viewing parties at their office, which is gorgeous.
Amazing.
So far this season. So that's good. As far as other smaller sponsors for us, NHRL came back for a second year this year. They sponsored both Starchild and Ripperoni. They are an automotive undercoating company from Chichester, New Hampshire. So they do both local automotive undercoating, both for rust prevention and for rodent prevention. So you can go to their facility in Chichester and have them do it by their employees. They also have certified shops all around the country who can apply the same product to your vehicle. And then also they have do-it-yourself kits. So if you want to save the absolute maximum amount of money and do it yourself, especially if you have like a lift or another way to get your car up in the air, you can do it yourself. So it's really good. I've got it on my truck, which is 35 years old. And when I went in for an inspection this year, because New Hampshire has state inspections, the guy was complimenting me on how good the whole thing has held up underneath, because as you can imagine in New Hampshire, the salt is pretty brutal. And yeah, it's held up really well. On top of that, SolidWorks has been the sponsor of Omega Team and then Aberrant Robotics before that for years, since 2019, which has been really nice. They've provided software to us for years. And then also they're the CAD system in which we design the robot. And then Send Cut Send, as always, has been a wonderful partner for us. They do all of our laser cut steel and titanium. And I would imagine a fair few of the people watching this would have probably heard of that name before or seen it. They're pretty ubiquitous in the combat robotic space these days, but there's really no beating them for price and lead time these days. And their customer service is really good. If you can always email them and get If there's a question or design issue with your part, they can always help you with respect to what's the issue, why this feature is cuttable, but this one isn't. That's all really good. So those are our main sponsors from 2023. So yeah, thank you to all of them.
I can't forget too, Monster Bolts. Monster
Yep.
Bolts provide us with all of our
Yeah, for sure.
fasteners, bolt screws, everything for both robots, Ripperoni and for Starchild. So fantastic, turned around, gave us a ton of stuff, enough supplies to last us forever, basically. So amazing, and thank you to them as well. So
Yeah, and make sure that you purchase merchandise from robotsruinmylife.com or
I wasn't
Starchild
gonna
will
plug my
show
own.
up.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I
It helps us obviously in the off season to offset some of the costs and funnel back into the team. So we have a lot of really great stuff on the site. A lot of exclusive little things, everything from pizza boxes to dog tags to you name it, Hawaiian shirts. Some P1 jackets still on there too. If you love P1, those are the best jackets going. So thank you, robotsruinmylife.com.
I always have to plug it. It's so easy. It just rolls right off the tongue. So, no, awesome. Well, I definitely am looking forward to seeing Starchild and any new iterations whenever World Championship 8 happens to take place, as I'm sure everyone else will be excited as well. And I think it's a really cool robot. I hope lots of fans really see that and latch on to this idea, because we need more diversity in BattleBots. I think that it's just great to see something different and see how it's going to fare against different types of bots. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's one of those things where if you don't, I mean, there's a quote is if you're not on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And when you're on the edge, sometimes you fall off, and that's what happened with a lot of the fights this year. But like you said, looking forward to next year, whenever next year is, next week, TM, right? So whenever that ends up happening, definitely looking forward to it. Been nice to have a little bit of time here. Hopefully a little bit more to have both a mental reset and the robot reset, and that's been really nice. So it's been cool to kind of do other stuff. Have our summer this year, which we didn't have last year, so we can go out and enjoy the ocean and the wonderful summers we have here. So that's been nice.
yes, 100%. Well, everybody keep following, obviously, seeing what comes next for Omega Team, and keep watching the show. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, support. There is a lot of really exciting stuff coming. So you'll definitely want to keep watching, and just, keep supporting combat robotics in general. It's growing. There's been so much buzz with NHRL lately, and I think it's really exciting, and just so much stuff to come. So just keep watching.
Yeah, absolutely.